Witness.
Thank you. Mr. Wicker, you sometimes ran personal errands for General Paxton, is that right?
That is correct.
When you did that, were you advised which service you were using, the campaign fund money or work money? Did you have to attribute where money was spent or your time was spent?
I wasn't compensated for most of those services, so no, I was not.
Okay, thank you. The second, because Mr. Busby asked you extensive questions, you told us that the damage was in the bedroom, correct?
Yes.
And did you see actual renovations anywhere in the home outside of the bedroom?
Yes.
Is it fair to say if you knew people were looking into your countertops and your cabinets, you might choose at that point not to get them upgraded?
Objection,
Yes.
speculation, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Okay. Do you know, in the course of working with the adjuster and looking at Steam Clean and those groups that work for the insurance side, or let me do this differently. Do you know that payments were made by insurance?
I do not know that firsthand, no.
But we've all taken as a given, I think, through the course of talking to Mr. Busby, that more further renovations were done, correct?
Yes, and that's what the document said.
Okay. I want to clarify something else, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot. When Mr. Busby was showing you pictures of the kitchen, do you have an independent memory now in regards to what those what the countertops looked like, or are you taking his word for it?
To the best of my recollection, those were the countertops.
I do not want to lead, so I'm going to ask you a question only because of a prior conversation. The answer doesn't really matter, but I want to clarify. Didn't you say redo the granite countertops when we first spoke, meaning what was being changed may or may not be granite again?
That was a mistake on my part, and as I mentioned to both you and Mr. Busby, I had to amend that statement to be more consistent with other statements made to law enforcement.
I see. So you've already had a conversation specific about this with Mr. Busby?
I did.
Okay. Have you and I had this particular conversation?
To the best of my recollection, yes.
Okay. And so when you made that correction for yourself, it's not because you were lying the first time, right?
No.
Okay. What is the most relevant part of that conversation with Kevin Wood? The renovations, which we know took place, which people only know about because of you, or the state of the cabinets and countertops?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading, number one, and number two, I don't think it's appropriate to ask the witness what's most relevant. That's the court's job.
I think I've made the point. It's okay. I'll move on.
Sustained.
Thank you. How many times did you hear the phrase, "I'll have to check with Nate"?
3 times
Over the course of one day or multiple days?
in the course of one conversation.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any question then that on 3 different occasions, the response to a question directed at Kevin Wood about financial impact of renovations was, "I'll have to check with Nate"?
That is correct.
Since you've already spoken to Mr. Busby, let me ask you a few questions about that. How did your conversation go? Did you call him or did he call you?
Whenever we were in preparing for this trial, every effort was made whenever the House team reached out to offer the same thing for the defense. And it was in response to that, in preparation for this testimony here today, that my counsel and I both reached out to Mr. Busby's team to have a conversation prior to me taking the stand.
It's an honorable and fair thing to do. Had you made prior efforts to speak to Mr. Busby or Paxton's team?
My legal counsel had, yes.
On your behalf?
Yes.
And at any point until the last week, did they take you up on that?
They did not.
He asked you a lot of questions about whether or not you overheard an agreement between Nate Paul and Ken Paxton. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do most people who are working together stand on top of a mountain, hands on their hips, and say, "I'll do this for you if you'll give me X"?
Objection, Your Honor. That's an improper question. Leading and
Sustained.
I mean, come on.
Do you understand that law enforcement and this investigative body can use circumstantial evidence to
Objection,
determine
Your
whether or
Honor.
not there's a conspiracy?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Objection, improper question. Speculation.
Sustained.
Yes, Your Honor. Let me do this differently then. Do you have any memory of when the Paxtons moved back into their home?
This would have been probably August, September timeframe, if I had to guess.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? For the record, I'm showing him what's marked as 698 and not in evidence as a document to refresh his recollection. Mr. Wicker, do you recognize that?
I do. If you can just give me 1 second to read.
Yes, sir.
Can I get a copy of that, Your Honor?
And we'd like to have a copy.
I mean, in candor, there are multiple copies over there, but I don't have them. May I take his and pass it around?
Yes. Give it to the defense first. We'll stop the clock for a moment. Are you ready?
I am.
You can resume the clock.
Since we do have a copy for everyone, I'm going to change course, actually. This is a text message that's included in 698, which is a set of documents provided with a business records affidavit, which have been provided to defense, and they've had notice of it for over 14 days, at which point I would move to admit 698.
I have no objection to this, Your Honor.
The court will admit Exhibit 698 into evidence.
And would you publish? Thank you, Stacy. Who is this a conversation between?
This states to be a conversation between myself, Mark Rylander, and Jeff Mateer.
What is the date?
It appears to be July 19th of 2020.
Okay. And do you see any reference to when the Paxtons might be moving back into their home?
It appears that it was around that time frame. So judging by the context here, he had been storing clothes at the AG's office, and we moved those back around that time frame.
Okay. So fair to say then the Paxtons' home was at least renovated enough for them to return to it in the middle of July?
Yes.
And would it surprise you to know that nowhere in those Cupertino records is there an invoice or estimate at any time during June or July?
I did not see that.
Leading, Your Honor. I'm going to have to object to leading.
Sustained.
Next, let me ask you. Let's turn to item 683, which is already in evidence. And Mr. Wicker, I'm sorry to take advantage of you since you're on the stand, but I need to recap a couple of things Busby went through. Tell me, if you would, the date on this document.
September 30th of 2020.
This document has been admitted as what we refer to as the cease and desist letter, so notice to Brandon Kamek to stop working. Are you aware of that time frame in the office?
I am.
And do you know that Brandon Kamek reaches out to Ken Paxton to let him know their problems?
I learned this later, yes.
Okay. But does this email corroborate what you heard?
Objection, Your Honor. I'm sorry. He just said he heard it later. That's hearsay. Now she wants him to corroborate hearsay with something else improper.
Sustained.
Okay, let's look at the document itself. September 30th, cease and desist letter to Brandon Kamek. Let's look at item 130. Do you see the date on this letter?
September 30th, 2020.
Is that 1:30? Oh, yes, ma'am, please. Sorry, Stacy. Thank you. Do you see September 30th referenced on this document as well?
I do.
And in the records provided by Esther Blind Trust, this is the first conversation about payment to Cupertino. Would that surprise you?
I was not aware of Esther Blind Trust, so I'll take your word for it.
So, but September 30th, Brandon Kamek is notified that there's a problem. Ken Paxton finds out, and the first thing he does is tell the Esther Blind Trust to send $121,000 to someone else.
Okay.
I'm going to turn your attention to item 223. I think this is also not in evidence, so do not yet. It is in? I got thumbs up from the side. In that case, will you pull up item 223? I'm going to have you scroll down, Stacy, to the return. Do you recall General Paxton being out of town at the end of September, early October, as the whistleblowers are coming forward and law enforcement is being notified that they're concerned he's accepting bribes and misusing the office? These questions are no different than the way he phrases them.
If I could, without being interrupted. Your Honor, this is outside the scope. I just want to flag that for the court. I'm going to let her do this because I want to talk about a few of these things that are outside as well.
It is outside the scope, but he's not objecting, so he will be able to do the same.
Yes, Your Honor. If it would have been helpful, though, I took extensive notes. Mr. Busby opened up all of these doors for me. Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're both out of scope, okay? You're both free.
On October 1st, do you know where General Paxton was in regards to the office? Did he come in?
No, ma'am.
And I'm going to have Stacy scroll down a little. Are these texts between you and Jeff Mateer?
Can you scroll up? Yes. Yes.
And what is it that you understood on October 1st was happening with the general?
I really didn't have an understanding at that time.
Did you think anything about the fact that he wasn't there or didn't want you to let people know what he was doing?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading, and he's already said he doesn't know.
Sustained.
I'm going to read from a document because it is in evidence. Says he has a lot to do out of the office and that I'm to tell anyone that asks that I don't know where he is. Is he telling you to lie?
I don't know that he's asking me to lie, just to state that I don't know where he is.
Stacy, if you would, please turn to Exhibit 131. Pause for a moment. In the upper left-hand corner, do you see that this account is affiliated with the Esther Blind Trust?
I do.
The same organization that was being told to make payment the day before by text, at least according to the documents and evidence before you.
Yes.
Do you see, scroll down for me, do you see that same $121,000 payment, $617, being made as it was requested by Ken Paxton?
I do.
And do you see who the recipient is?
Cupertino Builders, LLC.
Miss Stacy, if you'll pull up 703 for me, please. I'd like to see page 21. All right, Mr. Wicker, do you see who is supposed to be the count holder on these documents? It's under business choice checking, specifically choice.
Cupertino Builders, LLC.
And do you see the first line in the transaction sheet?
It shows an incoming wire in the amount of $121,000, 617.
Consistent with Cupertino being paid for remodeling or doing work at Ken Paxton's house, if that's what he has alleged, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's turn to page 3. These are the same records that include Kevin Wood, the contractor who you personally met, who helped facilitate whatever upgrades Ken Paxton might want, a person whose email address suggests he is Nate at World Class, and an individual named Raj Kumar. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Stacy, may we see the face of the business record affidavit? Do you see before you that the business records we've been referencing and that are already admitted belong to Cupertino Builders?
Yes.
Would it surprise you to know that, as Mr. Busby pointed out, it's when they were in Delaware and before they opened a Texas affiliate? Would you have any reason to be surprised by that?
Objection leading, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Do you also see that the individual otherwise referred to as Raj Kumar is in here named, I'm gonna butcher it, frankly, on the second page? Narsima Raju Sigaraju.
I do see that.
It was a valiant effort. I saw your smile. Next, Stacy, may we see page 16? Is this the same invoice Mr. Busby showed you a moment ago?
It appears to be, yes.
The same invoice that he splashed in his press conference for representation of General Paxton?
Objection, Your Honor. Improper question. She's talking about the press conference? I mean, that's not proper.
I'm going to sustain, rephrase.
Stacy, if you would for me, please turn to page 22. Now, Mr. Wicker, in all of the records before you, if there had been payments or estimates or supplies or timelines or communication in regard to payment in any way, in regards to Ken Paxton and Cupertino, don't you think Mr. Busby would have pointed it out?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading.
Sustained.
Then the very last thing I would like to ask you is this. In regards to the document, the invoice we had just looked at, this document is the metadata that was provided by Cupertino. It is already admitted into evidence. Please tell me what date that invoice was created.
October 1st, 2020 at 7:50 p.m. Central Standard Time.
After the whistleblowers, after he knows that you're aware of the renovations, after a cease and desist, after directing payment, only after all of those things does he get the first piece of documentation that would in any way credit that it was valid.
Objection leading.
Sustained.
I guess I'll end where the defense began. There are no coincidences in Austin. But the next piece, I think...
Objection to the sidebar.
We've had a lot of sidebars in this
A little bit of sidebar.
trial. I'll give you a sidebar. They've had a few.
One sidebar.
Overruled. You're even now on sidebars, okay?
The very last piece, I wish I could have ended there, but I need to get in the Uber records we discussed yesterday. The court had already said that they could be admitted after extensive arguments between both sides. I just failed to offer on the record for their admission.
Go ahead.
House moves to admit item. 700.
700 will be,
Take care of this.
we've already settled that, right? 700 yesterday. Okay, 700 will be admitted into evidence.
Your Honor, can we be heard on that? I think we have, I didn't know this would not be the right witness for this, but can we be heard on
Yes.
those records?
We spoke extensively and the court ruled yesterday.
Your Honor, we saw, I apologize.
I'm going to object to using the time, and may we approach.
Okay, we'll stop the clock for a moment. Approach. Court will come back to order. Where were we? Ms. Epley, were you up here? I think you were. So when we last left, and you can restart the clock, you were asking to admit 700.
Yes, Your Honor.
There was an objection. We've looked at the two documents. I had ruled that in yesterday. We see that they are similar, and so 700 is admitted into evidence.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pass the witness.
Eric, would you do me the service of putting on the screen what's in evidence, House Exhibit 571?
Objection, Your Honor. I don't believe this document has been admitted.
We offer 571 if it's not in evidence.
I'd ask that he take it off the screen,
Yeah,
Your
take it
Honor.
off the screen for now, Eric. We all know Eric,
We love Eric.
and everyone knows Stacy.
It's actually in evidence, I'm told.
We're checking. You don't have it? We'll check. Is this the House or AG's?
House Board of Managers Exhibit 571.
That is, Ms. Epley, it is in evidence according to our records.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Very good. Thank you.
All right.
Pull it on the screen, Eric, and make it big. And make sure you capture the time and date of this text. Get the date too, Eric. I'm gonna need somebody to confirm the date. Penley 5. As we're getting this date, can you see there that there's a text sent from Jeff Mateer to General Paxton where he tells the general that yesterday each of the individuals on this text made a good faith report of violations of law?
I can.
Do you know what date that was done?
I do not.
Okay. If this text was sent on October 1st, because we know they went to the FBI on September 30th, that means they were sending this text the day after, correct?
Yes.
On October 1st, 2020. Make sense?
Yes.
So on October the 1st, 2020, Jeff Mateer, along with several other individuals, sent this text to General Paxton, right?
That is what it appears to be, yes.
Now let's look back now, if we could, Eric, at the date and time that the general instructed his trustee to wire the money to pay for his home renovations. You heard the suggestion, I'm sure, Drew. You heard they suggested he only did that because he knew that his people had went to the FBI?
Objection, compound. I don't understand the question.
Overruled.
Yes. You heard that suggestion, didn't you, Drew, that the general learned that a few of his subordinates went to the FBI and therefore he hurriedly sent a text to pay for his house repairs? You heard that?
That was the insinuation in the last line of questioning, yes.
That's what she was insinuating, wasn't it?
That is what I understood, yes.
But the truth is, if we look at AG Exhibit 48, and we go to EBT 184, could you just tell us all, so we'll be clear about how the timing actually was? What was the time and date of when the general instructed his trustee to pay for his home renovations?
September 30th.
And that's also the same date that the invoice was due, right?
That is what the invoice said was due, yes.
Okay, and can we agree that September 30th, 2020 is before October 1, 2020?
Yes, sir.
Now, when we talked previously, I failed to ask you something that's real important. First, did these folks, how many times did you interview with these folks over there to the right?
I've spoken with them 3 times in preparation for this.
Okay, and the only reason you spoke to me is because you felt it would be fair to let me have a chance to talk to you as well after you had talked to them.
Anytime they reached out, I reciprocated and extended the same offer.
Okay. Did they ever show you any of the documents I showed you today?
Not to my recollection, no.
They didn't show you the bank wire showing that General Paxton and Angela Paxton paid for their renovations?
Not to my recollection.
They didn't show you the text message to the trustee instructing the payment?
Not to my recollection.
They didn't show you the document showing that the wire was actually received by the contractor?
Not to my recollection.
You ever wonder why they didn't do that?
Objection, Your Honor. Question calls for speculation.
Sustained.
There was a suggestion that you delivered some kind of document to Nate Paul. Remember that suggestion?
Yes.
You said it was a Manila envelope.
Yes.
You had told us that you picked up an envelope from Vassar that had a CD taped to it.
I don't recall that it was taped.
It was inside of it?
No, sir, it was on the exterior.
On the exterior of the envelope?
Yes.
You know for sure you didn't deliver that envelope to Nate Paul, don't you?
Not that envelope, no.
Okay, let's be clear. Whatever Vassar gave you that was checked out, you didn't check anything out, did you?
No, sir, there were signatures on the document, but I don't recall checking anything out.
Right. Vassar gave you something that you gave to the general, right?
That is correct.
And that particular document had a CD on the outside of the envelope.
That is correct.
And that certainly was not the envelope delivered to Nate Paul, was it?
Objection. Question calls for speculation and lack of foundation based on Drew Wicker's previous testimony.
Sustained.
Did the document or the envelope that you delivered to Nate Paul, did it have a CD on the exterior?
It did not have a CD on the exterior.
Okay. And just so we're clear, you never met Nate Paul in the dark of night in an alleyway and delivered anything, did you?
No, sir, it was in the afternoon.
In the light of day?
Yes.
It wasn't a secret at all, was it?
No, sir.
You did hear some conversations between Nate Paul and General Paxton, didn't you?
Yes.
Let's focus on what you heard. One of the things that was discussed was whether the raid by the
Honor.
federal agents.
Objection. Normally I wouldn't mind, but since I tried to elicit this exact testimony and don't want to waste the senator's time with a second redirect, I must object to hearsay.
She already asked this question, Your Honor. I'm just clarifying what she asked this young man.
I did ask it, and he objected despite me being absolutely certain it would come in. And at this point, he doesn't have the same exception because Ken Paxton is not his party opponent.
Sustained.
Sir, you know that the focus of the conversation was whether the raid was just. Isn't that true?
Objection. Question calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
You know that the discussion that they had was whether the FBI had followed the rules, right?
Objection. Question calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
You know that Mr. Paxton, General Paxton's discussion was whether the feds had violated the law. Isn't that right?
Objection. Question calls for hearsay.
Again, Your Honor, we've heard, he talked all about what Ken Paxton has said, and I'm entitled to explore that, exactly what was said.
He successfully shut down this entire line of questioning, whether he should have or shouldn't have, and he shouldn't be given the latitude now because he does not have an exception to hearsay.
Overruled.
You know that what your boss was saying was whether Nate Paul had been unfairly targeted, right?
In the discussions that I was privy to, Nate Paul did most of the talking.
Whether he had been unjustly targeted, right?
That was the concern that he expressed.
Because you know sometimes the legal system gets politicized, don't you?
Objection, relevance.
He was asked this by the Board of Managers, Your Honor.
Overruled.
You know that sometimes the legal system gets politicized, don't you?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Paxton, General Paxton's concern was whether there had been a miscarriage of justice. Isn't that right?
Objection, question calls for speculation.
He said it in his own words, Your Honor.
He can't say that in his own words, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Now, you knew that General Paxton had some distrust of DPS, didn't you?
Objection, relevance, and hearsay.
Overruled.
You knew that, didn't you?
I did.
You never heard General Paxton say he was going to do anything for Nate Paul. Isn't that true?
He never stated that he would take any action directly on his behalf, no.
Now, there was some suggestion about something that you delivered in a manila envelope, right?
Yes, sir.
Was it like this one?
Yes, sir.
Just like this?
Very, very similar, if not the same.
You don't know what was inside of it?
No, sir, I did not look.
You have no evidence to offer about what was in the envelope?
No,
Objection
again, I
asked and
did not.
answered.
You do know, of course, that it was a couple of pages at most, right?
What I stated was that I do not recall the thickness of the document.
Was it this thick?
Again, sir, I do not recall.
You can't say that it was anything near this thick, can you?
I can't
Objection,
say
Your
that.
Honor. Inconsistent with his prior testimony, he's mischaracterizing the evidence. Mr. Wicker used his fingers to show roughly, 2 centimeters to an inch in thickness, which is consistent with what is in Tony Busby's hands.
I appreciate all the speaking objections you ask us not to do, but I'd like to finish up so we can get on down the road.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Now, could it be, let me ask you, did you ever exchange texts with Nate Paul?
I don't recall any text exchanges, no.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Would your text refresh your recollection?
If there are any, yes.
Now, you got a chance to look at the document without testifying what's in the document. Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Okay. You had told us that that packet, not a packet, the manila envelope you delivered was sometime in the summer, maybe even the fall, right?
No, sir, the testimony that I provided was summer.
Summer, June, perhaps, right?
Yes, sir. Earlier in the day, I stated that it was likely May or June.
And that text you had that you were exchanging with Nate Paul was in June of 2020, isn't that true?
Yes.
And you exchanged texts with Nate Paul before you delivered an envelope just like this one, didn't you?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm asking the man a question. I'm entitled to an answer.
Overruled.
You exchanged texts with him before you delivered an envelope just like this one. Isn't that true?
Objection, Your Honor. It assumes facts, not evidence.
I
Drew
want
Wicker
some
has
time
been very
back with this
clear
foolishness.
about the timeline, and Mr. Busby.
Overruled.
Didn't you?
I don't recall whether or not this text message occurred before delivery or after.
Can we agree that you were texting Nate Paul about Dick Weekly?
That is what the text messages show, yes.
Can we agree that you delivered to Nate Paul information about an event Dick Weekly was holding because Dick Weekly was trying to get Nate Paul to donate money to Texans for lawsuit reform?
No, sir.
You don't remember that?
No, sir, I do not.
Can we agree that that text that you're holding in your hand confirms that you were texting information about Dick Weekly to Nate Paul?
It does.
Your Honor, with that, I pass the witness.
The briefest of redirects, please, Mr. President.
Get one.
You're back up.
May I proceed?
You may.
Is the conversation you had with Dick Weekly, if it existed at all, something that would have to be delivered by hand to Nate Paul?
No.
What was it? What was the construct of the conversation?
The conversation that I'd had with Dick Weekly was with General Paxton on his Dick Weekly's back porch, in which we were engaging in a fundraising conversation. I do not recall Nate Paul having been mentioned, and if it was any information tied to TLR, I don't see why that couldn't have been sent via email, if that's the question.
So completely made up in regards to this, to your knowledge?
Objection leading, and also, Your Honor, I'm just curious, we're going to keep questioning the witness? You're going to get extra turns like this?
You'll get one more cross and then we're
Okay,
done, because
thank you.
this is the first time we've gone to 2 redirects and you'll have a chance to recross. But I thought the lateness of the trial would allow it. I think you smiled knowing I'm sustaining his objection.
I did. Thank you, Mr. President. Do you have any reason to think that this story Mr. Busby has told you has anything to do with that manila envelope?
Objection leading.
Do you?
Sustained. Try another way.
Thank you. Did you ever need to deliver an invitation from David Weekly to Nate Paul?
Not to my knowledge.
Pass.
I mean, yes, sir. The truth is, you don't know what you delivered, do you?
That is correct.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Are both of you, can we dismiss the witness? Excuse the witness, rather?
I think must have missed, yes.
Subject to recall. Okay. You're excused, subject to recall. Thank you. Mr. Harden, who should we have the bailiff bring in?
I'm sorry?
Which witness are you calling?
Mr. Blake Brickman, please, Your Honor.
Bailiff will bring in Mr. Blake Brickman.
Mr. Busby, are these your documents up here? Is any of this yours?
Mr. Harden, as we move forward, we're going to break around 3:30 for a short break, just